things I noticed, and I was wondering if you noticed them too. Does Peter Brown start all his chapters off with the word the? And I went back and looked, and he does. All of them start off with the or the. So this one is called The Fish, and it's chapter 60. And remember, I talked about how I don't think that he makes mistakes. I just want to be really clear with that. But I feel like there was an opportunity missed in the story for this one. Sorry, let me get situated. So chapter 60, The Fish. And actually, just look at that fish, because we know that fish. That fish is rockmouth. And let's read this chapter and then we'll talk about it. So, the fish. Help, help! He's got my tail! Paddler was splashing and screaming in the pond. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver were nowhere to be seen, so Roz picked up a fallen tree branch and stomped into the shallows. Grab onto this, she said, as she reached out with the branch. Now, Roz can go only so far into the water, so the branch helps her reach farther to get to Paddler. So, grab onto this, she said, as she reached out with the branch. Paddler grabbed it with his big teeth, and the robot lifted him up out of the water, and there, hanging from the young beaver's tail, was Rockmouth. The grumpy old pike, in one quick movement, Roz pulled in the branch and gripped the fish with her two hands. Paddler flopped into the water, where his parents suddenly appeared. What is wrong with you, Rockmouth? Mrs. Beaver dragged her son away. You've always been such a nuisance, but this time you've gone too far. Do us all a favor, Roz, and toss him to the vultures. I cannot do that, said the robot, but I might be able to help. So Roz is going to help, and let's see what happens. Okay, so she's going to help. Roz placed Rockmouth in a deep puddle near the pond where he couldn't swim away, and then she waited for the fish to explain himself. Fish aren't very talkative, especially grumpy fish like Rockmouth, but eventually he opened up to the robot, and before long she was waving for the beavers to join them. Rockmouth used to live in the river, said Roz as the beavers shuffled over. But you trapped him here when you built your dam, and he has been angry about it ever since. That doesn't give him the right to attack my son, hollered Mr. Beaver. It most certainly does not, hollered Mrs. Beaver. I'd be upset too, said Paddler softly. I hate to be kept away from my home. Mr. Rockmouth, you should have said something sooner. The fish looked up from the puddle with a frustrated expression that meant, I tried, but no one was listening. Well, the situation had to be remedied, and you can guess who rose to the occasion. Roz was determined to get Rockmouth back to his home. After she explored the nearby waterways, it became clear that she would have to carry the pike through the forest and across the great meadow to the nearest bend in the river. I need a large container, said Roz to the beavers, something I can fill with water so Rockmouth can breathe while I carry him home, because fish have to breathe through water. They get their air through the water, pushed through their gills. I could make it myself, but I thought you might like to help. It couldn't have been easy to overcome her anger with Rockmouth, but after Mrs. Beaver had a chance to cool off, she finally came around. I suppose we're partly to blame for this situation, she muttered, and then the beavers did the right thing, and together they carved out a wooden barrel for the fish. So doing the right thing means admitting that you caused something to happen and that you have to take actions to remedy it. And I feel like that's something the bears haven't done yet, right? The bears caused something to happen, Roz to lose her foot, but they haven't taken action to correct it or to acknowledge what happened. Here you go, Mrs. Beaver rolled the barrel over to the puddle where the robot and the fish were waiting. This should work nicely, Rockmouth. I hope you're happy back in the river. Rockmouth just flicked his tail in a way that meant, will someone please take me home now? Roz filled the barrel with water and a grumpy fish, and then they were off. She carried Rockmouth through the forest and across the meadow until she was standing on the riverbank. Welcome home, said the robot, and then she tipped the barrel, and the fish plunked into the river. Rockmouth's face poked above the surface, and he flashed a big, toothy grin, and then he quickly swam away. And that's the end of that chapter, and I feel like I know that there's some story with Rockmouth. I feel like it's not finished. This is the thing I'm talking about. So I have to figure out where that part of the story was, and the only way we can do it is to keep reading. I can't remember. I'm going to read chapter 61 because look how short it is. Chapter 61, Robot Stories. The Robot Stories. The story of how Roz helped Rockmouth spread through the river and across the island, and it was soon followed by other robot stories. There were stories of Roz growing gardens in dry, barren places. There were stories of Roz nursing sick animals back to health. There were stories of Roz creating ropes and wheels and tools for helping her friends. But most of the new stories were about the robot's wildness. You see, Roz had noticed that the wilder she acted, the more the animals liked her. So she barked with the foxes and sang with the birds and hissed with the snakes. She romped with the weasels. She sunbathed with the lizards. She leaped with the deer. That spring was a very wild time for our robot. Oh, I just feel like chapter 62 is called The Return, and we know who's coming back. Let me just pause here, and then maybe we'll read that one.